It's the final conclusive episode of Higurashi Sotsu. It's been a long ride, one that had our expectations thoroughly crushed at the beginning and then proceeded to take us on a crazy roller coaster, one that never failed to be explosively controversial at every turn. So with the series finally complete, let's ask ourselves, what have we accomplished at the very end and what can we learn from this? Short answer, that's entirely up to you. Hi, my name is August, and let's close out Higurashi Gou Sotsu and this analysis series of mine. Here are my thoughts on the last episode. And with that out of the way, let's begin. Before we take a more in-depth look at this final episode, let's cover the events for a brief bit. Hanyu and Eiwa duke it out in the fragment world, and Hanyu loses again. Back in Hinamizawa, Rika is preparing to slay Satoko with the Onigari no Ryo-O, but then throws the sword away to instead beat some sense into Satoko. The sword that Rika throws away ends up becoming summoned by Hanyu, who uses it to attack Eiwa, maiming her, who then turns into a miniature lolly. Like, okay, I guess. Fulfilling her end of the bargain, Eiwa laughs to herself once again, and then just leaves. Back in Hinamizawa, in classic anime best friend disputes, Rika and Satoko continue to engage in more fistfighting until they both collapse from exhaustion. The two get picked up by Mion, Keiichi, and Rena, and they teach him a little lesson on friendship. The two reconcile in the end, and then we skip to a fragment to where Rika is about to begin school at St. Lucia's Academy. Satoko and Rika have their final conversation between each other before parting. From there, we get a time-lapse of the current everyday life in Hinamizawa, where everything is alright in the world and everyone is living a happy life. Now it's strange. I was willing to put up with all of Higurashi Sotsu's antics all throughout this season, even including the bombastic yet controversial last episode, but this episode was the one where I had to draw the line, especially since the series is complete now. Let's start with Hanyu'S fight with Eiwa. I'll extend my suspension of disbelief of Hanyu summoning the sword out of nowhere. That's fine, I've done so before. What I'm not willing to easily accept though, is Hanyu's speech about creating a miracle through your own power, in regards to the Higurashi Gou Sotsu series. Her speech here is the main lesson Rika and Hanyu learned from the original story. Referencing that theme is fine. However, that same message doesn't have the same impact when it's applied to this series, because there's no solid evidence to support it. What was the miracle that was created? An immediate thought that should come to mind is the box scene. But I firmly believe that Rika's discovery that Satoko was the culprit was an accident, not a miracle through willpower. If we were to consider willpower, enduring the many loops is valid, as shown by the original series. But here in Gou Sotsu, Rika would have eventually given up if it wasn't for that accident. It was through chance that it happened, not willpower. Which makes this idea of a miracle in the context of Higurashi Gou Sotsu flimsy as a concept. There's the idea of certainty that Satoko keeps bringing up as a counterpoint, but besides being a cheeky reference to Umineko, that concept was never followed through to the very end. It also doesn't help that there's no counter proposal from Eiwa at all. Eiwa is here purely for entertainment. There's no further commentary at all from her. In fact, she just refuses to explain anything. If we were to summarize, Eiwa barges into Higurashi, makes Satoko a looper, drops a couple of when they cry references, doesn't say anything about them, turns into a lolly, and then just leaves. Thanks, Eiwa. So back in Hinamizawa, when Rika and Satoko finally get picked up, the resolution and moral of the story is finally revealed. That friends can still be friends even if they are apart. To dig deeper, both Rika and Satoko love each other very much, but it's because of that obsessive love that it's tearing them apart and tying each other down. They don't have to be together all the time. They can have differing opinions, but they can still be friends. Things change. People can move away, pursue their own goals, obtain new relationships. It's all just a matter of time. And accepting that is a lesson one has to learn, to grow up as an individual, to graduate, if we want to include the title of the show. And this message is given to them by the other club members. But the problem with this is that they have been absent for a majority of the conflict. They exist as pieces on the Hinamizawa chessboard, but there's no building blocks that lead up to this, and thus it lacks the impact to land this point. There's also the whole killing each other brutally and Satoko tearing out Rika's intestines. But sure, let's just slide down to the rug, I guess. So in terms of how I feel about the Higurashi Gou Sotsu series as a whole, now while I do appreciate the series' existence in Higurashi Gou in its new interpretation and ideas, some of which were controversial yet bold, the execution in Sotsu I found rather unsatisfying as a whole. And I bet even more so if you abhor how it all turned out in comparison to the original Higurashi. To summarize my personal main points in a nutshell, it's a brand new spin on the original story of Higurashi that had ideas worth exploring. There's the idea that the Matsuribashi Hen future isn't the only clear-cut solution, and that there are many other perfect fragments that could possibly exist. The controversial yet bold move in giving Teppei the biggest redemption arc, as well as Takano's follow through with acknowledging her sins. The exploration of Rika and Satoko's relationship dynamic and the restraining dependency between the two out of love, and finally, serving as a potential link connecting all of the titles in the When They Cry universe for you lore masters. On the other hand, however, there was the surprise that Higurashi Gou Sotsu wasn't a remake of the original story, deceiving everyone with expectations. The murderous execution of in-depth characterization of prior main characters from the original story, using contrived plot mechanics to make it work. The surface level motivations which the story lacked to provide further implication, and the biggest fault of them all, the fact that from a viewing perspective, Sotsu is founded on reused material. I may make a separate video going more in depth, but these are my main arguments for and against Higurashi Gou Sotsu. And yet, despite all those thoughts, I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy Higurashi Gou Sotsu. Yes, there were downs, but it kept me entertained with its surprises. I think the moment I stopped fully comparing it to the original story is when I started having more fun with it, and just kept waiting to see where Ryokishi's wild roller coaster went and where it ended. I do acknowledge and understand its criticisms, but I don't absolutely hate it either. Otherwise, this analysis series would have stopped way much earlier. Don't get me wrong, I still love Higurashi, I just like the original series and Higurashi Gou Sotsu for entirely different reasons. And I can acknowledge the story that this series wanted to tell, and I don't hate it nor Ryokishi for wanting to convey this tale. But of course, these are my own interpretations and my feelings on the matter, and I'm sure mine are very different from yours. So I ask you, what do you think of this episode and Higurashi Gou Sotsu in general? I'm sure a lot of you have many thoughts, both positive and negative. But similarly to Rika and Satoko, we should acknowledge those differing opinions in order to form a better understanding and attempt to learn from it. If you are interested in my coverage of the Higurashi visual novels, I have a review of the original story on my channel. In addition, feel free to check out my reviews and live reactions of the Umineko visual novel series as well. Thank you all for watching, and if you are a new viewer or if you've been here since the very beginning, thank you for the support. This is August, and I'll see you again someday, perhaps when someone else cries.